This is Martin Boyd here from Profisee. I'm very excited to be hosting, along with Avanad, this webcast around modern data management for modern manufacturing. We'll talk a little bit about Profisee in just a moment. We are a master data management software company, and we're co-hosting this presentation with Avanad, who is a leading provider of innovative digital and cloud services, business solutions, and design-led experiences on the Microsoft ecosystem. With 30,000 professionals in 25 countries, they're the power behind the Accenture Microsoft Business Group. They are a great partner of ours and a great partner of Microsoft, and have a lot of experience in this space. If we have time for Q&A at the end, which we certainly hope to do, we'll have Avanad come on and talk a little bit about themselves at that point. So let's jump into the presentation. What we're going to be talking about here are, first of all, have Microsoft talk a little bit about challenges that they're seeing in manufacturing. Microsoft, of course, are in many, many lines of business, but they have a lot of business in manufacturing. So hearing there about what their experience will be interesting. The need for business, the need for visibility within the different lines of business that make up manufacturing, and then some of the data domains that make up a trusted platform. I'll then talk a little bit about Profisee and the need to be able to trust your data and how you can go about building a trusted data foundation across different data domains and lines of business, and the role of master data management within that. We'll then have our expert practitioner, the star of the show, Ken Squires, and he'll introduce himself and some of his background. But he's implemented over the last few years a number of different MDM solutions, and so he'll talk about practical uses of master data management, making it a way of life in manufacturing companies, and then talk through some hard-won lessons. And we certainly aim to have some time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop any questions into the chat box as we go along. We won't be just, to keep the flow, we won't stop to answer them as we go along, but we will certainly attempt to cover as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Michael Walton. Michael, are you there? I'm not sure whether Michael has been able to join.
Yeah, Michael was not able to join. I don't know if an emergency came up or what happened.
Okay. All right, so then let me roll forward this. What I was going to do was introduce Michael Walton of Microsoft, a director and industry executive around manufacturing. However, I'll pinch hit and present his slides because he and I work pretty closely on building this, and certainly we share a lot of background, and certainly we share a lot of perspective on how all this works. If Michael is able to join, just interrupt me and I'll have him take over, but rather than drop his slides, I'm going to just present to them. So in modern manufacturing, just to kind of set the scene, we all know that data volumes are going up. It used to be that we had a good amount of data. Now we have an exponential growth in data. I think we all know this. There's more systems coming online. There's more ability to interoperate and share that data. And there's more expectation that data should be used for business advantage. So the data is growing exponentially. The system complexity of the systems that it represents or that is housing that data is going up exponentially. There's on-prem systems, there's cloud systems, there's hybrid systems, there's data lakes and business applications. And one of the things that really kind of makes the complexity even greater is the fact that there's a lot of M&A in the space, particularly true in manufacturing. There's acquisitions, and the data that comes with those acquisitions is never quite as seamless as you'd like it. So there's multiple ERP systems, potentially multiple CRM systems, MRP systems, and many other systems where there is good data, but that data has never been created on an equal basis. So being able to share it and interoperate it, it gets more and more difficult. So we're working in a fairly complex, difficult landscape, probably more so in manufacturing than many others. And at the same time, there's a requirement and an expectation of digital transformation initiatives from executives, and rightly so. With all of this data, there's an opportunity to drive revenues, to do something disruptive and innovative across the board, to drive revenues, to drive down costs, to drive down risk in the system, whether it's, for example, supply chain resiliency, or if you've had a supply chain interruption due to COVID or changing tariffs or whatsoever, how do you make sure that you're still able to maintain some of your supplies? And if you need to comply with new regulations, how are you going to make sure that you can comply with the regulations? So a lot of these things are changing, and you need to be somewhat nimble in order to meet them. And if you have a handle on your data, you can start to do that well. If you do not have a handle on your data, that kind of thing will be very difficult, which speaks to agility. Again, it's all very well having all of these great ideas. Sometimes, most often, I would argue, the thing that is most difficult in terms of responding to some of these changes and implementing some of the great ideas that may come up is simply, if you have your arms around the data, if it's well organized and if it's complete and you can trust it, then you can move pretty quickly. But every time you try to implement a strategic initiative, or even ask a simple question about your data, like how many customers do we have, which are our most profitable customers, how can we service our customers better? We want to implement a program to do ABC to make our high quality customers, our high volume, high revenue, high profitability customers even more happy. If we can't even answer basic questions about who those people are, then all of those things get harder. And if you don't have your arms around the data, then even answering some of those simple questions, as we'll talk about, becomes a bit of an issue. So that's the background on which we see ourselves. So as a manufacturer, what does that mean to you? Well, there's three, I think, broad areas of use case within a manufacturer. First of all, there's the operations inside of the business. You're there to build stuff, to manufacture stuff. So there's your manufacturing operations. Then you can look up the supply chain to your vendors, suppliers, etc., and look at how well and efficiently is that part of the business operating. And then you can look down your demand chain to customers and distributors and fulfillment of various different types. And so if those are kind of the three broad areas, then there are use cases around all of that. So within the operations area, you may be doing things like predictive maintenance on manufacturing assembly line or whatever machines on assets. You may be doing warehouse management. You may be doing logistics planning. If you're looking up the supply chain, you may be doing things like trying to drive strategic sourcing and procurement. So you need to potentially aggregate information about suppliers or vendors, aggregate information about items that you're buying, raw material costs, et cetera, in order to give the strategic sourcing folks, the procurement folks, the information they need to drive better negotiations and contracts. You may be, I talked about supply chain resiliency a moment ago, you may be needing to look at if our supply chain gets disrupted in this particular area. And I think this is something that Ken will speak to, because he has specific experience around this when we get to Ken's portion of the presentation. But to thumbnail it, you may want to look at what are our most profitable product lines, what are our most pivotal product lines, what are the things that if we had an interruption in supply would have most detrimental effect, and what might be alternative suppliers there. That requires you to know a bit of information about products, about suppliers, and about profitability in order to do that basic, let's say basic analysis before you can take action on that. And similarly, down the demand chain, looking to where we're selling stuff, you may be thinking about how can we build a better online catalog? How can we improve the customer experience? How can we do a better job of demand forecasting, which might have ripple effects up and down the operations and supply chain? And when you really, and this is something that I know Michael was keen to talk about, around next best step promotions. So Microsoft has particular energy around, if you can capture buyer behavior, meaning who has bought what are the correlations between those different things. You can start to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to that in order to figure out what might this person or group or company also want, and start to build promotions around that in order to figure out what might be the next best step in terms of providing a promotion or offer to them and drive revenue and presumably customer service. So again, all of that requires having a good handle around the data. In that case, it would be customer and product and various different actions. So all of that, I mean, hopefully it's clear within a manufacturing organization, there are many different use cases that can drive success. All of that requires authoritative, reliable, trusted data foundation. And in master data management, we tend to think of those things in terms of domains. So there's the supplier or vendor domain, where we're buying things from. So in that case, we need to know what are the names of those organizations. If there's overlaps or duplicates within different divisions, we need to be able to match and reconcile those so that we have a clean, unduplicated, complete and consistent list of who are our vendors. If you've got 10 different ERP systems, inevitably that's not going to be clean and clear and organized. You're not going to have mastered that domain. You need to master that domain and have a way of correlating it, synchronizing it across all of your different domains in order for that to be effective. And the same conversation for all of these. If you don't know across all of your ERP systems or MRP systems what you're buying and when you're buying it and what you're paying for it, then all of that analysis, or many chunks of the analysis that you would want to do up here, will not work. Same with assets. If you're trying to do predictive maintenance, where are all your assets? What is the maintenance schedule? If you're trying to do condition monitoring, what's all the information you need to know about the machine or the type of machine, the category of machine, how it gets serviced, et cetera, in order to drive that. Reference data across all of your systems, from simple things like state codes or country codes or order codes. Again, there's likely to be disparity across all the different back-end systems that capture that information. You need a way of consolidating that and having a single virtual view if you want to understand the data and drive some of these actions. I won't belabor the point, but facilities and locations, geocoding, all of that kind of stuff, you need to have consistent information there. And two of the biggest areas kind of left for last year, the product, meaning what do you sell, is something that requires a lot of information. Typically that information, I mean, inevitably that information must exist. You know what you're selling as a manufacturer, but have you captured it in a way that can produce a high quality online catalog that people can search and buy from? Is it consistent across the board? And who are the customers who are doing the buying? Do you know, are you able to consolidate your understanding of who is buying what and help figure out customer behaviors, profitability, all of that kind of stuff? So are all of these things being done in the business already? Inevitably, yes, of course they must be, but are they being done efficiently? If you do not have consistent, clear, unambiguous information in these master data pillars, let's call them, or domains, then in every one of these things, you are doing inefficient work. It's redundant. There's a lot of firefighting. There's a lot of data wrangling, and you're slow, you're less agile and able to really drive the use case, which is why master data management makes such a big difference. So how does Microsoft look at this? There are likely to be many data sources, ERPs, multiple CRMs, multiple MRPs that may come from different regions, may come from different acquisitions, just legacy of various different types, vendor files, customer orders, even Internet of Things inputs. And what you're trying to get from that, all those many inputs, is some clean, clear understanding in a modeling and visualization kind of way that may land in Azure analysis services, Synapse, Power BI, whatever dashboarding or reporting BI environment you want. You have all that information available for visibility and for clarity and how you're going to take business action on it. The question is, what's in this big gap in the middle here? Because if we just take all this jumble of information and throw it into a reporting tool, it's probably not going to do you much good. You need a lot more than that. So the two things that you need are you need fast, secure, efficient data movement and storage, ideally in the cloud. That's really what Microsoft brings to the table in this particular case. And you need to ensure data completeness, consistency, and accuracy in order that when you bring the data together, you can draw some kind of useful conclusion from it. So the first part of that, Azure Data Services, in the case of Microsoft, and it doesn't have to be Microsoft, of course, but this is a Microsoft example here. Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Catalog, Azure Data Lake, Databricks are some of the components that make up that secure data flow in the cloud. And in order to ensure data completeness and accuracy, that's where something like Profisee with master data management comes in, enforcing data quality and governance standards across systems, identifying and resolving data issues, doing match, merge, and enrichment, as well as many other things, in order to make sure that you have data that is useful, and the combination of that gives you an opportunity to drive BI. So again, that's where the authoritative, reliable, trusted data information comes from in order to enable all of this. And said another way, supply chain performance is dependent on consistent definition of customers, products, items, locations, and other master data objects. When data is poorly governed and inconsistent, supply chains become less competitive, says Andrew White of Gartner. I think some of this is kind of common sense. If your data is messed up, you're going to have a hard time doing a lot of this stuff that let's call it common sense. But a lot of companies struggle with how to get from the recognition of the problem to how to actually resolve it, which is where we were talking about the need for master data. Okay, so that was Michael's portion of the presentation. Hopefully I was able to do that justice, and hopefully by the time we're done, Michael may have joined and we'll be able to include him in the Q&A.
And Martin, this is Heidi. Yes, Michael has joined. So.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Apologies, you did a wonderful job for everybody in the audience. Thank you. Apologies on the technical part on my end, and but that was a fantastic overview, and I can't underscore how important master data management is in the landscape we have moving forward. And thank you for doing that. I'll stay on.
Oh, perfect. All right. So we'll drive some of the Q&A towards Michael when we get to the end, so that we can hear a little bit more of his unique perspective, because I'm sure I didn't do quite as good of a job as Michael would have done. So thank you. All right. So let me talk a little bit about master data management, as I said I would at the beginning. So hopefully we've teed up this idea of different data domains and different pieces of why master data management is required. And it's all about can you trust your data? You clearly have lots of data. Nobody in this world doesn't have lots of data. The question is, and what we have found in surveys and research of our own, is that 60% of manufacturers struggle with a missing piece of what Microsoft thinks of as the data estate. And then what they're struggling with is the fact that they can't trust their data. They can't trust that it's complete. They can't trust that if they pull a report, that it's an accurate report, that it hasn't have duplicates, all of that kind of good stuff. And so master data management, and in our case, Profisee master data management, can fill that gap. That's what MDM is there for, if it's done right. So in a manufacturing organization, your prime objective, if you like, is efficient manufacturing. You could define efficient in lots of different ways. It could be innovative, it could be profitable, etc. But ultimately, you're making stuff, and you want to do that as efficiently and as responsibly and the most agile way that you possibly can. And I think what the recognition now has to be that in order to do that, amongst many other things, with the right technology, the right organization, all of that good stuff, that you need a core competence in data management. Without that, everything else is going to be, really, I would say a struggle, but in some cases a non-starter. And that's where this whole idea of the authoritative, reliable, trusted data foundation comes into play. And I won't walk through all of these domains again, but in the world of master data management, we think of these as domains. And by the way, this isn't by any means a complete list. There are many other ways that these domains could be defined. And in the case of Profisee, you can define any domain you want. In fact, one of our advantages, we believe, is that customers can start in one domain, they can grow to another domain. You're not buying new software, you're not getting a new license, you're just kind of building out your data model in whatever way makes sense to you. And you can build things that aren't even on this list here. So that's kind of the backdrop. If you think about it as a little acid test or litmus test for yourself, can you answer some of these simple questions? This will give you an idea of whether you have your arms around the data or not, whether you have good, consistent, clear data or not. So which are our top 10 most profitable customers? Simple question, tends to be quite hard to answer. And I think Ken has a real world example of that he'll probably speak to in a minute. How much do we buy from these vendors? If you're trying to do strategic procurement negotiations, you need to know that. And you need to know what you're buying from those vendors. Again, not necessarily easy information to know if your data is spread across multiple ERPs or MRPs. What's the supply chain risk on our most popular products? What are our most popular products? What are our most profitable products? And what's the risk if we experience a supply chain interruption? What would we do about it? Again, I think Ken will speak to that in practical detail. But these are the kinds of questions that common sense says you ought to be able to answer those, but it's never as easy as you think. So it's a little bit like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle. You're pulling information from lots of different places in order to do that. So how do you go about it? And let me use the example of customer data. Not that customer data, in some organizations, it's the right place to start, but not all. It's just that when we're picking an example, it's a good one to pick because it's something that everyone can resonate to, because everyone has customers, and it's kind of a common example. But I don't want you to think this defines it. This is just an example. So when you're thinking about customer data, though, and master data management, what's an example of this kind of pulling together the jigsaw puzzle? So in the CRM system, we may have company Crete Carrier. We may have this lady, Deb Varchi. 3 different versions of Deb Varchi, Deborah Varchi, and a different spelling of Deb Varchi, not uncommon. The first thing you'd want to do is synchronize and merge all of that stuff. Make sure that we don't have those duplicates anymore because of data entry errors or whatsoever. So that's one little corner of the jigsaw puzzle. Another may be in the ERP system. This company and this person exist in the ERP system, but there's some information missing. What are you going to do about that? How are you going to fill it in? You can, for example, refer to outside systems in order to enrich that, or there may be information in some of these other systems that you can pull in order to create that another element of that complete reliable record. And that's another piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Another piece might come from the supply chain management system, where there's order information and addresses and that kind of thing. So we pull that in, and it's another piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And in terms of BI and data warehousing, if we just took the raw information from all of these systems and dumped it into the data warehouse or data lake or graphed data warehouse or anything like that, and tried to do some of the reporting that we care about without having taken care of the underlying data quality, we'd end up with maybe 5 different versions of Crete Carrier, and now you're trying to do profitability or you're trying to do any kind of analysis. Clearly, it's not going to be good analysis at that point. So you need to create a single version of the truth here, and that starts to create this single, complete, correct understanding of who this person is as a buyer and her company and all of that kind of stuff. Now you can do interesting things like AI and machine learning and all the analyses that we've talked about before. And I want to also point out, this is not a moment in time thing. This is not a one-time cleanup and now we're good. Now we have a good picture of this person, because all this data is changing all the time. People are still entering and changing information in the CRM. People are still entering and changing information in the ERP and the SCM and lots of other associated systems. Or we're doing another M&A, and now this person may be coming in another system that's not synchronized, etc. So there is an ongoing, all the time, everyday effort to keep on synchronizing this data, no matter what. So it's not a one-time cleanup; it's an ongoing effort. But once you've assembled that kind of composite picture, that can be used to drive business advantage. So just one example here in the interest of time, of that. This is from Danaher, who is a dental supplies manufacturer, a manufacturer in the dental supply space, that is. They had gone through a certain amount of M&A, so they had a number of different ERPs with a number of different record companies represented in them. In this case, Mount Rushmore and White and Bright in the ERP1 from the Noble Biocare part of their business. Then you've got Cavoucar, which was another part of M&A, different ERP, different background, different customers, although some overlapping. So White and Bright overlapping, the Molar Bear, clearly made up information, by the way. Some of these where there's overlaps, you want to then be able to identify that there are overlaps and that both different divisions are selling to one organization. In order to be efficient and professional, you want to figure that out so that you're not got lots of overlapping outreach to that customer. And where there's an opportunity to bring in data from one system to another, you want to recognize that because there may be an opportunity for cross-sell and upsell. And in fact, that may be part of the rationale for the M&A in the first place. So being able to recognize that, being able to enrich both systems with complete correct information, and whether at some point you physically merge those systems, or whether you kind of keep them separate but virtually merge them so that you have a virtual record. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but you need to at least recognize and see that how all this information comes together so that you can act on it appropriately. There are many other use cases that in the interest of time I won't go through. You can find a bunch of them on our website, and these are a lot of organizations where we've a lot of them are joint with Microsoft and some with Avanade. You can find these on the left-hand side here on our website. You can go find these use cases, and then there's a number of others that are worth listing just because they are good customers in the M&A, in the manufacturing space, from Becton Dickinson to Winnebago to Chesterton, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go through all of those. What I will do instead is hand over to our expert in the space, manufacturing industry executive, Ken Squires, who can talk a little about, or hopefully talk a lot about, some of his experience in implementing MDM across multiple use cases in a manufacturer. So Ken, I will hand over to you and let you introduce yourself further.
Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate it. And I also just want to thank Profisee and Avanade for having me here today. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about a lot of the great things I've seen in the marketplace and what we've accomplished at the various firms I've worked at. I will let folks know, I have a few folks on the call from Ontario. I think it's fantastic. Welcome. Just to let folks know, I am a Boston guy, so I'm usually very direct, and I'm absolutely a Bruins fan for those folks from the Toronto or Ontario area. So don't hold that against me at the end of the call, so I'd appreciate that. But a quick background, I started off in manufacturing. I got hired into United Technologies many moons ago. I probably had a full head of hair back then, so at that time they were hiring anyone at that point. But I really got into the IT integration within finance and different areas very early in my career. And as I walked through that career, I've seen how you can leverage technology to drive efficient business processes, reduce costs, and add value into the organization from either a revenue perspective, a cost, or a risk management perspective. So I think some of the great work I've done. I was at Ernst & Young and McGladrey, RSM McGladrey, for about 10 years, and then I got a great job, a dream job. I got to go into ITT Incorporated, a fantastic company, and really build out from scratch a lot of their analytics, their MDM capabilities, build a team, and really work through that process. So it was a great experience for me. I do now live in Boston area, down on Cape Cod. If anyone's been there, it's very beautiful. And I have really enjoyed the time with Michael and Martin pulling together this deck. So I'm excited to talk about it today. Martin, if you go to the next slide, please. So one of the things I learned working with, a lot of Fortune 500 and also some mid-range companies and my experiences at ITT is the first area you really have to step back and think about is your approach. You have to understand your landscape. And what I mean by that is you'll see various different bullets here. I'll touch base on them a little bit, but you have to understand your business complexity, the organizational structure, your technology, your business applications to really get a great idea on how you want to approach leveraging master data management to drive value in an organization. Without that groundwork and that framework, you're gonna have a really hard time pushing forward around what I call kind of like the 3 stumbling blocks with getting MDM moved forward. First is when you talk to the business users, there's a lot of confusion what exactly it is. It seems like it's some sort of metaphorical IT term, like what do we need this? They want to buy another new tool or whatnot. And the best way to get over that is really focus on the value that you can provide there, both from an analytics perspective, but also in other parts of the organization, the transactional activities, and describe to them. When we talk about master data, we're really talking about the descriptions of the vendor, the customer, things of that nature that help you drive value. And when you put it in business terms rather than the technical terms, that's one of the roadblocks you get through as well. I also call it old school CIOs. You have a lot of people that have grown up that they think of transactional systems. That's great. We'll get DBAs, we'll update the tables, we'll do our stuff and we move forward. Today's world, with the interconnectivity of the systems and the drive to be competitive with cross-selling to customers, understanding your product strategy, your supply chain risk and resiliency issues, there's a whole host of driving factors that are causing manufacturing firms to be connected in greater detail through it from a data set perspective. Whether or not that's sharing manufacturing processes or manufacturing different parts and products across the geographic world and sharing manufacturing volume capabilities, centralized supply chain capabilities to drive down costs and do supplier consolidations and things in that area. And then my last one I always think about is really sometimes our own issues is within IT itself. We have in this space, what I have seen, and I've seen it in other industries as well, a really lack of investment into our people, conferences, training, new ideas. So the challenge we have with a lot of our people is I'll just use Java and .NET to do everything, or I'll just move the data and we can transform the data without thinking about the new ways that the cloud is driving needs for the interconnected type of data and the sets we need to be able to manage our businesses. So really the big thing is look at your strategy, look at the different systems you have. Do you have a common language? What type of support models you have? And then create a framework of moving forward based off that base level. I call it kind of the pyramid. I like the pyramid example, but that base level of that pyramid, get a great understanding and then move forward from that perspective. And then the slider is really you centralize or you decentralize how much complexity you need. You have to really figure out that process because it is really tied into business users with an underlying technology platform. So you need that tie-in together to be successful. And I found this to be very important, whether or not consulting at Ernst & Young or my experiences at ITT. Martin, next slide, if you don't mind. So some of the ways we've looked at it, I've looked at it and helped clients is you look at how do you optimize your IT legacy. A lot of folks and companies I've seen, they step back and say, you know what, we're going to go on a 5 to 10 year journey of consolidating everyone on a common ERP platform. And that was very common years ago, right? But even if you pull together from acquisition and you have different technology stacks, you still have to drive value out of that data set in today's world from a supply chain perspective or a revenue perspective. So some of the things we really looked at is, you know, when you look at vendor and you look at shared services model, and how do you look at consolidating P2P activities or accounts payable activities? Some of the things we've helped clients with, and we were successful at previous firms I've worked at, is really leveraging the vendor domain, understanding the terms, the consolidation of vendors, allowing for leverage of negotiations. All those things are driven by a knowledge of vendors and consistent vendors across your multiple systems. And I've worked with companies, we've taken an approach where we would consolidate the AP processing. And what that means is you have to really get your invoices, your payments, your vouchers, your POs, all of that wrapped up is in order to have that be consistent and accurate and free-flowing with reduced IT costs and maintenance supports and improved service delivery, you'll be able to have to connect all that data that's moving across the board. So I've seen great use cases on the transactional side where they're leveraging the MDM technologies, driving business process efficiencies, lowering IT costs by able to connecting the data across the board. And then in my next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what the end game is with analytics once you get the vendors and suppliers set up in that domain. One of the other areas that we looked at and drove out is customer, and it's very specific around customer and credit. So a lot of manufacturing firms have cash flow or cash concerns, like most companies across the board. One of the things they do is when they sell very expensive products or they sell products to their customers, they're taking a look at that customer's credit rating. And you want to be able to understand the credit rating across customers. But if you don't have a common view into the customer from outstanding orders, outstanding invoices, you're not going to be effectively aware around the credit limits and where you're at with your credit exposure with some of your major customers. And again, I'm talking about the shared services type of activity. It's a transactional thing. So when you look at the customer domain, not only do we want to enrich it with data and master data for analytics, some of the examples Martin gave earlier, and I'm sure Michael will give more during the Q&A, is you also want to practically be able to manage that customer across your systems for credit exposure. So there's those activities from that perspective. And the other type we've done is we've actually used it for SAP implementations. We've had 5 different systems. We needed to consolidate, rationalize, and dedupe the domains. And we found leveraging the MDM technologies was very effective and drove a lot of cost reductions in that sub-work stream around the master data management on ERP implementations. So those are some of the direct use cases from that perspective. And what we did and what I've done for companies is when you look at that case, that business case, you set yourself up for success with the next set of analytics. A lot of people jump right to the analytics, but there's a strong power there to run your transactional systems, connect into sales systems, whether that's Salesforce.com and SAP, being able to manage prospects and customers and keep accurate data sets. And what we've done, and from a consulting perspective and working live with companies I've worked for, is we really drove cost reductions in the IT support. And that wasn't reducing heads. It was actually leveraging and shifting them from 80% production support to 20% production support, 80% projects. So we were able to accelerate and take on additional projects just by reducing the support costs associated with disconnected service delivery models. And we were able to improve the service delivery model out to the business as well. Martin, next slide, if you don't mind. And one of the things we did is once we set up and we had a real use case to get the funding, and so funding is a very tricky thing sometimes in organizations. How do you get that funding for that tool when it's competing across the board? In the previous slide, we talked about the transactional area and how to create the data flows consistently and how you can look at ROIs with support costs, improve service delivery, et cetera. But when we looked at the MDM process, we looked at how else do we set up for future analytics. So when we looked at supplier/vendor, and then customer, on the supplier vendor side, we really focused on the parts, the raw materials, et cetera, that were coming in with these different suppliers, ensuring that we had accurate knowledge across the board. We also had to do some material type of master data. So we had to make sure we were coding things properly in the system. I'm gonna give you kind of a bad example, but it's not a bad example, a non-fancy example. Look at cardboard and pine wood. Most manufacturing companies need some sort of packaging materials, cardboard, wood, et cetera, in order to ship their products, okay? And when we took that step into looking at how to look at the manufacturing analytics piece and drive costs down on material spend, we needed to have a common framework to understand the different suppliers and what they were providing us and the different products, parts, and raw materials in order to be able to then go out and get volume discounts, consolidate vendors, price discounts across the board of all of our different capabilities. And then we were able to take that and embed it within our purchasers and buyers from the supply chain side and really drive value. And when you step back, that was a net new I've seen at Ernst & Young and ITT, because when I come and talk with most manufacturing companies, they're doing a great job at the information piece, delivering the standard reports, the ad hoc reports. And yes, for those folks that know about OLAP, that's a really old term. I was teased yesterday by someone fun on the call here about OLAP. It stands for online analytical processing. I know it comes from the 90s. I apologize for the very old terminology, but you could probably guess my age from that perspective. But when you look at that area, how do you get to the next step? How do you get to start talking about the knowledge and intelligence around your business? It's the connectivity of the data. It's the common language and common metadata around the master data management. Some of the other functions we did in manufacturing analytics is really around labor efficiency, machine uptime, and that was connecting into our time and labor systems to have consistency around our time and labor systems, to be able to look at how we were servicing our machines, our maintenance, where our efficiency and overtime ratings were going, and look at that consistently across manufacturing facilities so we can share best practices. And in the reverse, I'll flip in there, risk. If you have union shops, there's a really high risk for inconsistent usage of overtime and how overtime is being allocated. So that's one of the things we were able to do quite well, is increase our capability to manage the risk around unfair overtime distribution to our workforce from a master management perspective. And we have many examples I've gone through when I was revenue across order. I'm going to be conscious of the time because I know we want to have some questions and answers as well. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we can do some Q&A as well, Martin. So some of the hard lessons I have is really start with, the value around the domain. How do you get the coverage, and we're building it? Always strategically think building for the future, even if it's going to be a replacement of a vendor portal that was custom created in order to facilitate accounts payable processing. Think about how else you could drive value there with information. That means you got to reach out to finance folks, sales folks, purchasing, supply chain, et cetera, outside of your typical AP team. The AP team's not going to know the value that needs to be added on there. They're going to know what do they need to transact AP. So you got to really get outside of the different groups to get better answers and draw that out. One of the things we've done and I've seen is master data is really owned by the business, right? The description of the data elements, and they're the ones that are going to be using it, not IT. So get them to engage early into the system, get them to own and be those governors of the master data per se. Focus on real problems that can be solved, because that's how you get your funding and that's how you get your quick wins, and be able to build your programs going forward. One of the other things is we enabled these technologies inside of other deployments that was part of larger programs. And then once those were successful, we were able to pull it out and do MDM on its own as a separate program. And then always plan and scope for the future with quick wins in mind. The business quickly wants to see results from some of these things. So bite off enough that you can get quick wins, and it's not going to be a long-term type of delivery in this area, because it's the quick wins with the velocity is the key to maintaining momentum and continue funding. And Martin, I'm going to hand that back to you. Hopefully I covered everything you'd like. If not, please point out a few things and I can continue engaging.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. So let me kind of just summarize. What I took from this, hopefully what you heard and took from this as well, is that it's tough. It can be tough working in a manufacturing environment. The data volumes are skyrocketing. The system complexity is skyrocketing and not getting any simpler very soon. But you need visibility across all of it if you're to respond to the various demands of the world, the business, digital transformation, all of that kind of good stuff. Secondly, MDM can help fill a gap and provide a proper foundation for all of that stuff. But it's important to recognize use cases are what drive value. As Ken just said just a second or two ago, the only way you're going to get funding to do any of this stuff is to tie it to a use case. So the use cases drive value. The more domains that you're able to enable and build stable, trusted pillars around, the more use cases you can handle, because these things do overlap. If you have items that are being acquired and you have vendors, then you can drive strategic procurement and supply chain resiliency and things like that. the more of these domains you build out, the more of those use cases you can hit. And MDM, because of all of that, MDM is becoming a required core competence. You need to handle this stuff some way or another. You can't leave it to chance, and you generally can't leave it to people hacking around with spreadsheets, because that's too slow, too expensive, too inconsistent. And leading practitioners such as Ken have built trusted data foundations across many different domains. Hopefully you heard that within Ken's conversation. There was a lot of different domains that he hit on in order to be able to deliver the value that he mentioned. And you need to be driving business efficiency and eliminating redundancy as you go across all of these things. That's part of the ROI that's being driven. And standardizing data to drive specific use cases is kind of at an operational level what you need to be doing. So hopefully all of that is you heard that clearly. What I'm going to do now is open up to questions, but because we missed Michael at the beginning, because apparently there was a problem being able to log in, so apologies to the audience and apologies to Michael for that. I'm going to ask Michael to speak for just a couple of minutes on his perspective on all of MDM and all of what he thinks is going on in manufacturing. Then I'll ask a question of Avanad, and then we'll open it up to general questions. So if you have a general question, please type it into the Q&A box now so that we can line those up. Michael, are you there?
I am, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
So
Martin.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you heard my
So-
question. I was just going to repeat it. Sorry.
No, not at all. So for everyone, you know, it's a growing problem that I'm witnessing. I see so many thinking that they can do it without a master data management solution that is able to choreograph all the data. And I'm working with several customers at this moment right now who are trying to overcome this with respect to, they've got a complex ERP. Some of them have multiple ERPs. They have master data management around some things in their ERP and then not other areas. And so what is happening is we receive, you know, there's a lot of inconsistency in the way that things are reported. I'll give you a great example. Simply a part number from a supplier and how it's stored in a certain system, or how it may be stored in a PLM solution, and then including in an ERP, and then how it's actually then reported against and how it's tracked all the way through the manufacturing process. That part number could be 13 characters long, 12 characters long, 10 characters long, and actually be moved and manipulated in different ways, and actually end up causing some significant challenges. And a lot of organizations use Microsoft Excel and others to recondition the data to be able to move master parts data throughout their enterprise. It just causes a lot of inefficiency and latency throughout the systems. And in the floors, it becomes, you know, the floor is no longer optimized in that particular example. So what I would share with everyone is really take a strong look at MDM if you don't have it today. If you have it today, are you using it correctly, wisely? Is the scope of it properly defined? And I could say to you that, you know, the golden grail at the end, the holy grail at the end is, you know, getting visibility throughout your supply chain and creating the agility that you're looking for, such that transportation can action what is being actually agreed upon future with parts that are being defined throughout the system or customer data. So just enough for that for now, but I couldn't underscore this enough, as I see this as a huge opportunity for manufacturers for gross improvement.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael. We'll get to questions, I hope, in just a moment, and I already see a couple of questions that are going to be directed to you, so hang in there. Avanad, are you there, Oliver? Let's have you introduce yourselves and just talk for a moment about Avanad and your perspective and all this stuff for manufacturers and where you guys add value.
Hey, Martin, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. So this is Oliver Richardson from Avanad. I look after data and AI for our Midwest region. We have lots of wonderful manufacturing companies in the Midwest that we are proud to work with both Microsoft and Profisee to help improve their business. You know, one of the things I was thinking about as we were going through the presentation today, a lot of great perspectives on the importance of MDM and some very practical guidance from Ken. You know, one of the things that stands out to me is that anything that has management at the end of it or aligns to something called governance, you know, can sometimes have a little bit of a problem in terms of gaining priority for funding. You know, what I would say there is, you know, especially with everything that's happening right now, it's really important for organizations to step back and think about how they're responding to the current market conditions, how they're rethinking their business in order to drive growth, and not having this strong foundation is a real impediment to being able to pivot quickly to new business models, new ways to do customer acquisition, ways to drive efficiency in the business. I don't think there are many organizations that have a chief data officer, despite what Gartner wants to tell you. And for those organizations, you know, I would recommend, you know, thinking about this from a priority standpoint. There's probably a lot of projects vying for priority right now, and I think master data management, you know, should be, you know, in there. It should be in the mix in terms of thinking about how companies move forward. So, you know, just one point I wanted to add in there, and that's one of the ways that Avanade helps. You know, we help build those value cases in order to move those kind of transformations forward.
Thanks, Oliver. And I'll just reiterate, both Microsoft and Avanade, and of course Avanade's highly correlated with Microsoft, are great partners for us. We find that there's an awful lot of commonality in the kinds of in manufacturing companies who are implementing this. They find a lot of value in the Microsoft technology approach, and Avanade is an expert in the Microsoft technology approach, as well as MDM as a technique, as well as kind of the management consultancy and change management required around it. So thank you both for being on this webcast with us. Let's hit a couple of customer questions before we run out of time. There's a question on, do we have any upcoming webinars to show Profisee in action? We typically don't do product demos on these kind of these webcasts. We prefer to handle higher level stuff, hopefully the way we did here today. However, there are many different ways of getting customer demos and getting a good view of the product itself. If you go to our website and request a demo, you should be able to very quickly get either a vanilla standard demo, just to get a feel for what the product is like, or you can get a custom demo depending on what you're looking for. So usually that's pretty fast. Another question, and this will be, I'll direct this to Michael. Profisee stop with respect to Microsoft Azure, etc. So Michael, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, so Profisee is available in Azure. I know that there's also on-prem versions, and so it takes and encompasses all the way through to logic apps with API management and lots of other IP that is already enabling, and it continues to make that investment around Profisee such that you can have a greater ease of use and scale. If you have some specifics, please go ahead and put those in. But I think that, you know, with API management and trying to gain speed and velocity, being able to scale it in terms of use, it's all there. It's not containerized where you can just use it that way as like infrastructure as a service. It's actually a lot of native code in Azure, so it's quite impactful.
Okay, great. Quick question for Ken. So as a practical matter, quite often IT sees some of the data disparity and the data issues in the business, but it can be hard to get execs to understand that and buy in that investment is required in that area, and specifically the MDM is the right thing to get started with. Do you have any words of wisdom on how to get started and how to build executive backing?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is truth across the board. I think when you can point out those discrepancies from a data perspective and how they cause impact into the business processing or the services that the business provides to their customer, whether or not it's an internal customer or an external customer, that's when you get more traction from a conversation standpoint. I think if it's just an IT conversation about, you know, clean. I had some people work with me that talked about this quite a bit. It was just an IT conversation about we need clean data, they'll match together and things will be great. I've seen through my consulting days and at my previous firm is that a lot of the IT executives are not buying that anymore. There's been a lot of promises of delivering, this massive value that IT has given in the past. And, they're hesitant to buy any more of the theoretical type of conversation. So from a practical matter, tie it to impact to business processes, service now ticket volumes, things of that nature that can be translated meaningful into value, whether or not it's from a support perspective, customer quality perspective, or a cost perspective. You'll get more traction that way.
Excellent. All right, thanks. We're at the top of the hour. Before everyone signs off, I hope that you got value out of this. And I do apologize for any issues that any of you had logging in. If you would do us a favor, and if you had problems logging in, could you just tell us about them in the Q&A box, just so that we get a little bit more understanding as to what went wrong at the beginning, so that we can diagnose and make sure that we don't have that in the future. And very shortly, this webcast will be posted, I believe, on the Profisee website. So if you did miss some of the introductory parts, you should be able to get it there. So with that, thank you very much, and thanks for your time and attention. Hopefully this was of value.